The Zephyrian Empire had once ruled the galaxy with an iron fist made of pure energy and crystal. For 3,000 years, their massive ships had moved through space like glowing jewels, bringing fear to every world they found. The aliens inside. These ships were not flesh and blood like humans. They were beings of pure energy that lived inside crystal bodies, thinking themselves gods among the stars. But now, even gods could die. The trouble started in the far edges of their empire. At first, it seemed like small problems. A power station would stop working on one planet. Computer system would break down on another. Zephyrians thought these were just normal accidents that happen sometimes. They sent repair teams to fix everything and went back to their normal lives. But the problems got worse, much worse. Entire fleets of warships suddenly went dark in the middle of space. One moment they were flying through the void, their crystal holes shining with inner light. In the next moment they were just floating rocks, cold and lifeless. The energy beings inside died instantly when their crystal homes stopped working. Zephyrians called it the entropy plague. It was like a disease, but it did not attack living things. Instead, it attacked order itself. Wherever it touched, machines fell apart. Energy systems collapsed. Even the most advanced technology crumbled into dust. On the great homeworld of Zephyr Prime, the High Command met in their crystal palace. The building had stood for 2,000 years, but now its walls flickered like a dying candle. The beings inside were scared, though they tried not to show it. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and thousands of species, but they had never faced anything like this. Commander Zalthek looked at the reports with growing fear. The plague has reached the inner systems, he announced to the council. We have lost contact with 7 core worlds in the past week. The other commanders shifted nervously in their crystal forms. Energy crackled between them as their emotions ran high. They had always believed their technology was perfect, that their empire would last forever. Now they watched it crumble around them. How long do we have? Asked High Counselor Veleneth, her voice echoing strangely in the vast chamber. At this rate, perhaps 6 months before the plague reaches Zephyr Prime, Zalthek replied. Maybe less. The silence that followed was heavy with despair. 6 months to save an empire that had taken 3,000 years to build. It seemed impossible. But then, ancient knowledge offered a glimmer of hope. In the deepest archives of their great library, Zephyrians found old records from the early days of their empire. These files spoke of a small blue world in a distant corner of the galaxy. The planet was home to primitive creatures that walked on 2 legs and made tools from metal. The early Zephyrian scouts had dismissed them as too backward to be worth conquering. However, the old records mentioned something strange about these humans. They seemed to have a natural ability to fix things that should not work. When their machines broke down, they found ways to repair them with whatever materials they had. When their societies fell apart, they built new ones from the pieces. They never gave up, no matter how hopeless things seemed. The ancient texts called it the spark of entropy reversal. While every other species in the galaxy slowly gave in to chaos and decay, these humans fought against it. They created order from disorder, built life from death, and found hope in the darkest moments. Most importantly, the records suggested that humans were immune to entropy-based attacks. Their minds worked differently from other species. Where logical beings like the Zephyrians followed strict patterns of thought, humans were chaotic and unpredictable. This chaos might be exactly what was needed to fight the entropy plague. You want us to ask for help from primitives? Veleneth asked. When the idea was presented to the council, they are not just primitives, Zalthek explained. They're survivors. Every other species we have encountered either joined our empire or died fighting us. But these humans, they would find a way to keep fighting even if we destroyed the entire world. The debate went on for hours. Some counselors thought it was beneath their dignity to ask for help from such a backward species. Others worried that the humans might be dangerous if given access to Zephyrian technology. But as reports came in of more worlds going dark, the choice became clear. They were dying, and pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. The decision was made. The last great fleet of the Zephyrian Empire would travel to the small blue world, called Earth. They would offer the humans everything they had ever dreamed of in exchange for their help. Advanced technology, extended lifespans, knowledge of the galaxy, and a place among the stars. But as the crystal ships began their journey toward Earth, none of the Zephyrians realized the terrible truth. They were not just seeking salvation from the humans. They were bringing their doom to humanity's doorstep, wrapped in promises of a better future. The entropy plague traveled with them, hidden in the quantum fields that powered their ships. Soon, both species would face the same enemy. But only one would survive. The night sky over Seoul had never looked like this before. Massive ships appeared out of nowhere, their crystal surfaces catching the city lights and throwing them back. Like giant mirrors? Each vessel was the size of a mountain, floating silently above the bustling metropolis. People stopped in the streets, pointing up at the impossible sight. Some screamed, others took pictures, but most just stared in wonder and fear. Around the world, every military base went into high alert. Radar systems that had been quiet for decades suddenly filled with signals. The ships were everywhere, floating over New York, London, Tokyo, and dozens of other major cities. Generals shouted orders, presidents were rushed to bunkers and nuclear. Weapons were prepared for launch. Dr. Lee Min-ho was eating dinner with his family when his phone rang. As one of the world's top experts in alien communication theory, he had always known this day might come. But knowing about it and living through it were very different things. "You need to get to the United Nations building right now," his boss told him over the phone. "The aliens are trying to talk to us." Min-ho looked at his wife and two children, their faces pale with fear as news reports showed the alien ships on every channel. "I'll be back soon," he promised, though he had no idea if that was true. The emergency session at the United Nations was unlike anything in human history. Representatives from every nation sat in the Great Assembly Hall, their faces tense with worry. Large screens showed the alien ships hovering motionlessly over cities around the world. Military advisors whispered urgently to their leaders about defense plans and evacuation procedures. Then the message came. It started as a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The sound grew stronger, more complex, until it became something like music mixed with mathematical equations. Min-ho put on his special headphones and began working with the quantum computer that had been set up for this exact situation. "It's a language," he announced to the room. "But not like any language we know, using quantum frequencies to encode meaning directly into the signal." For 3 hours, Min-ho worked to decode the alien message. His hands shook as he typed commands into the computer. The fate of the entire human race might depend on getting the translation right. Finally, the patterns began to make sense. "They're not here to attack us," Min-ho said, his voice barely above a whisper. The entire assembly hall fell silent. "They're asking for help." The translation that followed shocked everyone in the room. The aliens called themselves Zephyrians, and they came from an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. But now they were dying. A plague was destroying their civilization, turning their advanced technology into useless metal and crystal. "They say, we have something special," Min-ho continued, reading from his computer screen. "Something they call the ability to reverse entropy. They believe humans can fix things that should be impossible to fix." President Kim Soo-yang leaned forward in her chair. "What exactly are they offering us?" Min-ho took a deep breath. "Everything. Technology that could let us live for hundreds of years. Ships that can travel faster than light. Knowledge of thousands of alien civilizations. They want to make us part of their galactic empire." The room erupted in excited whispers. For centuries, humans had dreamed of traveling to the stars. Now it was being offered to them on a silver platter, but General Park Ji-yoon was more careful. "What did they want in return?" volunteers Min-ho replied. "Teams of humans to travel to their dying worlds and help them fight the plague. They think our unique way of thinking might be the key to saving their civilization." The debate that followed lasted all night. Some leaders thought it was too dangerous. The aliens could be lying, trying to trick humanity into some kind of trap. Others worried about the cultural impact of suddenly having access to such advanced technology. But as dawn broke over Seoul, the alien ships still floated peacefully in the sky. They had made no aggressive moves, fired no weapons, and threatened no one. If they wanted to destroy humanity, they clearly had the power to do so already. Dr. Yoon Ji-woo specialist in crisis management, stood up to address the assembly. "We've always been a species that takes risks," she said. "Every major advance in human history came from someone willing to try something dangerous and new. Maybe it's time to take the biggest risk of all." The vote was close, but in the end, hope won over fear. Humanity would accept the Zephyrian offer. Volunteer teams would be selected from every nation, every field of science and engineering. Earth's best and brightest would travel to the stars to help save an alien civilization. As the decision was announced, the alien ships began to move. They descended slowly toward designated landing areas, their crystal hulls shining in the morning sun. Ramps extended from their bellies, and for the first time in human history, people from Earth would meet beings from another world. What none of them knew was that the Zephyrians had brought more than just an offer of alliance, hidden in the quantum fields that powered their ships. The entropy plague was already beginning to spread. Earth's orbital platforms would be the first to fall. But they would not be the last. The age of human innocence was ending. The age of galactic war was about to begin. Dr. Yoon Gi-woo stepped off the transport ship and onto the surface of Kepler-4 for 2B, the first Deforian world she had ever seen. What greeted her was not the advanced civilization she had expected, but a wasteland of broken dreams and shattered technology. The city before her had once been beautiful beyond human imagination. Towers of pure crystal had reached toward the sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces alive with flowing patterns of light. Now those same towers lay in pieces, their quantum cores dark and cold. Streets were covered with a fine dust that sparkled in the alien sun, the remains of technology so advanced that humans had no names for it. "Welcome to Valkareth," said their guide, a Zephyrian named Veltar. The alien's form flickered and wavered like a bad television signal. Where once it had been solid, crystal filled with bright energy, now it was barely holding together. "This was our greatest colony world. 5 billion beings lived here before the plague came." Jiwoo's team of 12 humans walked carefully through the ruins. Each of them was an expert in their field: engineers, doctors, physicists, and computer specialists. They had come to help save the Zephyrian Empire, but what they found was worse than anyone had imagined. "How long ago did this happen?" asked Dr. Kim Sunho, the team's medical officer. He knelt beside what had once been a Zephyrian child, its crystal body now cracked and lifeless. 3 years, Veltar replied. "The plague moved slowly at first, then faster and faster. First the outer systems go dark, then the inner ones. We estimate that our homeworld has perhaps 6 months before it suffers the same fate." Engineer Cho Hyun-woo was studying the remains of what had been a massive power generator. The machine was the size of a building, but now it was just a pile of broken metal and crystal. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "These systems should have backup power sources, redundant safety measures. How could everything fail at once?" "That is what we hoped you could tell us," Veltar said. "Your species has a gift for understanding chaos, for finding patterns where we see only destruction. We have studied this plague for decades, but we cannot understand how it works." The human team spent the next week examining the ruins. They took samples of the strange dust, analyzed the broken machines, and tried to understand what had happened to this once great civilization. The work was hard and often dangerous. Sometimes the plague would flare up again, turning working equipment into scrap metal in seconds. But slowly, patterns began to emerge. The humans noticed things that the logical Zephyrian minds had missed. Small details that seemed unimportant but were actually crucial clues. It was Hyun-woo who made the breakthrough. He was working late one night in their temporary laboratory, studying quantum signatures from the plague samples. These signatures were like fingerprints, unique patterns that identified where the plague had come from.
"Oh.
"Dr. Jiwoo," he called out excitedly. "You need to see this." Jiwoo came over to look at his computer screen. "What did you find?" "These quantum signatures." Hyun-woo pointed to the glowing patterns on the screen. "They're not random. They're encrypted. And look at this." The encryption style matches Zephyrian military protocols. Jiwoo stared at the screen, not wanting to believe what she was seeing. Are you sure? I've checked it 3 times. This plague isn't some natural disaster or cosmic accident. It's a weapon, and it was made by the Zephyrians themselves. Next morning, Jiwoo called for an emergency meeting with Veltar and the other Zephyrian officials. She presented Hyanwoo's findings carefully, knowing that what she was about to say would change everything. "We need to know the truth," she said. "This plague didn't just appear from nowhere. Your own people created it." The silence that followed was deafening. Veltar's form flickered more violently, and the other Zephyrians present seemed to shrink into themselves. Finally, Veltar spoke. "We had hoped you would not discover this. It is our greatest shame."
Ow.
The story that followed was one of arrogance and terrible consequences. 300 years ago, the Zephyrian Empire had faced a massive rebellion. Dozens of conquered species had joined together to fight for their freedom.
Oh, yeah.
The rebellion was spreading across the galaxy, threatening to destroy the empire that the Zephyrians had spent thousands of years building. "We were desperate," Veltar explained. "Our military leaders developed the entropy plague as the ultimate weapon. It was designed to destroy the rebels' technology while leaving our own systems untouched. We thought we were clever, that we had found the perfect solution. But the Zephyrians had underestimated their enemies. The rebel species had brilliant scientists of their own, beings who understood that sometimes the best way to fight fire was with fire. They found a way to turn the entropy plague back on its creators, but not before making a crucial modification. They made it evolve," Veltar continued, his voice heavy with regret. "The plague learned to adapt, to overcome any defense we created. It spread beyond our control, consuming the rebels and our own forces alike." Jiwoo felt sick to her stomach. "So you brought us here to clean up your mess?" "We brought you here because you were our only hope," Veltar replied. ... Now we fear we have doomed your species as well." The revelation changed everything. The humans were no longer just helpers trying to save an alien civilization. They were now fighting for their own survival against a weapon that had already proven it could destroy the most advanced empire in the galaxy. Captain Kang Minsu stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense station, watching his worst nightmare come true. The massive screens around him showed a map of Earth's space defenses, and one by one, the green dots were turning red. Each red dot meant another platform had gone dark. Another piece of humanity's protection had been destroyed. "Platform 7 is gone," reported Lieutenant Han Naeong from her control station. "The plague hit their main computer core 15 minutes ago. They lost all power and life support." Minsu clenched his fists. 3 days ago, everything had been perfect. The Zephyrian ships had arrived with promises of a golden future for humanity. Their advanced technology would solve every problem Earth had ever faced. Disease, poverty, even death itself could be conquered with alien science. Now that same technology was killing them. "How many platforms do we have left?" Minsu asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. 11 out of our original 43, Naehong replied. "The plague is spreading faster than we can disconnect systems. Every time we try to isolate infected areas, it finds a new way to jump to clean systems." The entropy plague had arrived. Hidden in the quantum fields that powered Zephyrian technology, Earth scientists had been so excited to study alien computers and energy systems that they had connected them to human networks without proper testing. It was like inviting a vampire into your home once you let it in. It was almost impossible to get rid of. "Sir, we're getting reports from the surface," called out Communications Officer Park Hyunjin. "The plague has reached the power grid in Tokyo. They're losing entire city blocks." Minsu felt sick. Millions of people lived in Tokyo. If the plague reached the nuclear power plants, disaster would be beyond anything humanity had ever faced. But he couldn't think about that now. He had to focus on what he could control. "Get me Major SEO Taeyong," he ordered. Taeyong appeared on the main screen, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. Behind him, explosions lit up the darkness of space as his demolition teams worked to destroy infected platforms before the plague could spread further.
"Status report," Major Minsu said.
"We've successfully destroyed 6 infected platforms," Taeyong replied, "but it's not enough. The plague is adapting faster than we can work. Every time we use explosives, it learns how to protect itself from that type of damage." This was the terrifying truth about the entropy plague. It wasn't just a simple computer virus or mechanical failure. It was a weapon designed to learn and evolve. The more they fought it, the smarter it became. What about Dr. Kim Jizu's research? Minsu asked. Any progress on turning the plague against itself? She's working around the clock, but it's slow. Going the plague's code is incredibly complex. It's like trying to reprogram a living creature while it's actively trying to kill you.
Ow.
Minsu understood the problem. The Zephyrians had spent centuries developing this weapon, and even they had lost control of it. How could humans hope to master it in just a few days? But then he remembered something important about his species. Humans had never been the strongest or fastest creatures on Earth. They had survived by being clever, by adapting quickly to new situations, and by never giving up even when everything seemed hopeless. New plan, Minsu announced to his team. We're going to do something the Zephyrians never tried. We're going to fight dirty, instead of trying to cure the plague or contain it. Minsu ordered his teams to begin systematically destroying every piece of Zephyrian technology they could find. The quantum computers, the energy generators, the communication systems, everything had to go. But Captain, protested Lieutenant Naong, we are destroying technology that could advance human civilization by thousands of years. Better to be primitive and alive than advanced and dead, Minsu replied coldly. The Zephyrians watched in horror as human demolition teams moved through their ships, ripping out quantum cores and smashing crystal matrices with simple hammers and explosives. Veltar, the Zephyrian guide who had worked with the human research teams, tried to stop them. You're destroying centuries of scientific advancement, Veltar pleaded with Minsu. This technology could give your species immortality faster than light. Travel, unlimited energy. Should have thought of that before you brought your plague to our world, Minsu replied. His voice was calm, but his eyes were filled with fury. You came here asking for our help, but you lied to us. You didn't tell us that your own weapon was the thing killing your people. We thought we could control it, Veltar said weakly. We thought your species might be immune. We're not, Minsu said, but we're survivors. And if we have to choose between your advanced technology and our survival, we choose survival every time. The human strategy was brutal, but effective. By destroying the quantum entanglement fields that allowed the plague to spread, they were cutting off its ability to infect new systems. It was like performing surgery with a chainsaw, but it was working. Dr. Kim Jisu's breakthrough came at the worst possible moment. She had finally figured out how to weaponize the entropy plague, how to turn it against the Zephyrians themselves. But by then, the humans had already made their choice. Launch the modified plague, Minsu ordered. Target every Zephyrian ship in Earth orbit. The aliens who had come seeking salvation were about to learn what it meant to be hunted by humanity. Admiral Lim Heiji stood at the great window of the starship Terra's Hope, watching the stars drift past like distant candles in the darkness. 3 years ago, she had been a simple naval officer protecting Earth's coastlines. Now she commanded humanity's first interstellar fleet, and the galaxy itself had become her ocean. The ship around her was a marvel of human engineering mixed with salvaged alien technology. When the Zephyrians had brought their plague to Earth, they had also brought the building blocks of their own defeat. Human scientists had torn apart the crystal ships, studied every quantum processor, and learned to build something better from the pieces. Admiral called Commander Oh Sungmin from his station. We're receiving a transmission from the Altair system. Hyoji turned from the window. The Altair system was home to the Kelleri, a species of tall, graceful beings who had been enslaved by the Zephyrians for over 1,000 years. Like so many others, they had been freed when the human-modified plague destroyed their masters' ability to control them. Put it through, she ordered. The image of Ambassador Cathara appeared on the main screen. The Kelleri's blue skin seemed to shimmer with emotion as she spoke. Admiral Hyoji, I bring greetings from the Kelleri High Council. We have voted unanimously to join the Terran Confederation. Welcome to the family, Hyoji replied with a smile. Commander O, update our records. That brings our total to 47 member species, O reported. The Confederation now spans 12 star systems and includes over 200 billion beings. Hyoji nodded with satisfaction. The Terran Confederation was nothing like the old Zephyrian Empire. Where the aliens had ruled through fear and advanced technology, humans led through cooperation and shared goals. Every species that joined did so freely. Every member had a voice in how the Confederation was run. It had not been easy to build this new galactic civilization. After the modified plague had swept through Zephyrian space, destroying their ships and killing their leaders, the galaxy had been thrown into chaos. Hundreds of enslaved species suddenly found themselves free, but without the technology or knowledge to govern themselves. That was where humanity had stepped in. Not as conquerors, but as teachers and helpers. Human engineers had worked alongside alien scientists to rebuild destroyed worlds. Human doctors had learned to treat diseases that affected dozens of different species. Human diplomats had helped. Former enemies learned to work together. "Admiral," said Engineer Li Minzhong, approaching with a datapad in her hands. "I have the final report from the Proxima Centauri system." Hagi took the pad and read through the information. Proxima Centauri had been the location of the last major Zephyrian stronghold, a massive fortress built inside a hollow asteroid. For months, the surviving Zephyrians had held out there, using their remaining technology to defend themselves against the plague they had accidentally unleashed. "The fortress has surrendered," Minzhong continued. "All remaining Zephyrian forces have laid down their weapons. The survivors are requesting refugee status." "How many survivors?" Hugi asked. "Approximately 50,000, Minzhong replied. "They're being led by Veltar, the same Zephyrian who worked with our research teams in the early days." Higi remembered Veltar well. The alien had been their guide when the first human teams had traveled to the dying Zephyrian worlds. It had seemed so powerful then, so advanced and wise. Now it was just another refugee, seeking protection from the very humans it had once considered primitive. "Veltar is requesting a personal audience with you," Minzhong added. "It says it has important information about other threats in the galaxy." "Set up a meeting," Hagi ordered. "But make sure our security teams are present. I don't trust the Zephyrians even when they're beaten." 2 hours later, Hyoji sat in the conference room of her flagship, waiting for her former enemy to arrive. The room was simple but elegant, with a large table made from earth oak surrounded by chairs designed to accommodate beings of many different shapes and sizes. When Veltar entered, Yagi was shocked by how much the alien had changed. The proud, crystalline being, she remembered, had become a flickering shadow of its former self. Its energy form barely held together, and its crystal shell was cracked and dim. Admiral Hegi Veltar said, its voice weak and distorted, "I come before you not as a conqueror, but as a supplicant. My people are dying and we need your help. Your people came to us asking for help once before." Hiyagi replied coldly. "You brought a plague that nearly destroyed our world. Why should we trust you now? Because we have learned something that threatens not just us, but every living being in the galaxy," Veltar said. "The entropy plague was not our only weapon. There are others hidden in the dark spaces between stars. And some of them are still active." Hyoji leaned forward, suddenly interested. "What kind of weapons?" "World killers," Veltar whispered. "Planet breakers. Devices that can destroy entire star systems. We built them in our arrogance, thinking we were gods. But gods should not play with forces they cannot control." Revelation sent a chill down Hyoji's spine. If there were more weapons like the entropy plague hidden in the galaxy, they could pose a threat to every species that lived among the stars. "Where are these weapons?" she asked. "I will tell you," Veltar said. "I ask for something. In return, sanctuary for my people. A place where the last Zephyrians can live out their remaining years in peace." Hyoji considered the request carefully. The Zephyrians had been humanity's enemies, but they were also a dying species. Their empire was gone, their technology destroyed, their people scattered. They posed no threat to anyone anymore. The Terran Confederation is built on the principle that all beings deserve a chance at freedom and dignity, she said finally. "Your people will be given sanctuary, but they will live under Confederation law. No special privileges, no exceptions." "We accept," Veltar said, its form flickering with what might have been relief. "And in return, I will give you the locations of every hidden weapon the Zephyrians ever built. As the meeting ended, Hyoji looked out at the stars once more. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers. But humanity had proven that even the smallest species could make the biggest difference. The Zephyrians had waited for a savior to preserve their empire. Earth had become their reckoning and the galaxy's salvation.